What's up everyone? In this video we're going to learn about CSS pseudo-classes. Pseudo-classes allow you to apply styling to elements based on their state. For example, if you want to change the color of the text when you hover over the element with the mouse, or if you want to apply styling to every other element on the list. There are a lot of use cases for them, thus there are a lot of pseudo-classes. We're not going to cover them all, but we will go over a lot of popular ones. So let's begin. And we'll be creating a list of fruits for this video. So let's go ahead and create the section. Inside of the section, we'll be writing the H1 and fruits, since we will be representing fruits. And right below the H1, we will have the unordered list, since we have the list of elements. And remember that for the unordered list, inside of them, we'll be listing our items using the li tag. And inside of the li tag, we'll actually be using links. So let's go ahead and write our link. And for our link, we'll be using the a tag, and we will be using the href attribute. Those links won't go anywhere, so we'll be using hashtag for the href attribute value. And for the text inside of the actual link, inside of the actual anchor element, we'll be using, let's go with apples. And let's go ahead and copy that li a couple of times. And we're just going to change the list of fruits to be, let's go with oranges. And we'll change the last apples to be bananas. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and save the file and refresh the page. And perfect. So now we see our list of fruits and we have our links on the page. Now let's apply some styling. And first of all, we're going to center our text using the text align property. So inside of our style CSS, we're going to be targeting our H1, and inside of that rule, we'll be using the text align property. So let's do that, and we'll be using center. So let's save it and refresh the page. Perfect. So the fruits is now going to be centered. Next, let's go ahead and style our UL. And one thing that I'd like to show is if we look at the inspector tool and select our UL, and look at the box model, we'll actually see that the UL has some default padding on the left hand side of an element of 40 pixels. So basically a lot of elements in the browser have a default CSS styling, so we will need to actually get rid of them. And another thing that you can notice is when you use the UL, by default it has that disk marker, so we will need to override that also. So let's go ahead and close the inspector tool and jump to our CSS file. So inside of our CSS file, we're going to be styling our UL. So let's go and use the element selector and use the UL. And then let's go ahead and change the background color to be, let's go with light gray. And next we will be using the list style property to change that marker on the left hand side of our list element. So let's go ahead and use the list style. And since we don't want any kind of markers for our elements, we'll actually be using none as its value. So let's go ahead and save it and refresh the page. And notice how background color turns light gray and we don't have any markers on the left hand side of our list elements. So now let's go ahead and apply some padding and some borders for our UL. So I'm going to say padding to be 10 pixels, and we'll use the border of 1px solid black. Perfect. Let's save it and refresh the page. Cool. So now we see that our padding of 40 pixels on the left hand side of the UL went away. Now it's 10 pixels on all sides. And we also have some nice border of 1 pixels and solid black. Now let's go ahead and style our list elements. We're going to change their font size, padding, and margin. We're also going to be using the descendant selector that we've learned in the previous video. So let's jump to our CSS file. And for descendant selector, remember that we're going to be using space. So we're basically right now targeting all LIs that are descendants of the UL. And let's go ahead and change the font size. For the font size, we can use the font size property and change it to be 20 pixels so that we can see it better. Then let's go ahead and add some padding on the bottom, and we'll do that by using the padding bottom property, and we'll use some, let's go with 2 pixels, and let's also add some margin on the bottom as well as border on the bottom. So let's go with margin bottom, we'll go with 5 pixels for that, and let's change the border bottom to be, let's go with 1 pixel solid gray for that. Perfect. Save it and refresh the page. And what we see is that our links are a bit spaced out. It also has some border at the bottom and also some styling to the actual text. So if we take a look, we have apples, oranges, and bananas in blue, and they all have underlines. So why is that? Well, if we use the inspector tool, right click and inspect on the actual anchor element, we can see the following. In the styles pane, we see that we have some styles that we didn't write. So where are they coming from? Well, if we take a look at the right hand side, it says the user agent style sheet. So this is basically your default CSS from the browser. A lot of HTML elements have actually default CSS that comes from your browser, and we can see here that it's coming from the user agent style sheet, and we can see the color is going to be some default WebKit link color and some cursor pointer. That's basically when we hover, it's going to change the cursor to be a pointer. Text duration to be set to underline. This is exactly where this underline is coming from. So our goal is going to be to overwrite these defaults. We can also see down below that we have some styles inherited from the LI, and this is the exact code that we wrote in our CSS file. It also conveniently tells us the line where this bit of code is coming from. Notice it's coming from style CSS line 12. This is exactly where this code is being written. And if you're wondering why we actually applied the font size 20 pixels to LI and not the anchor element directly, well, this is because of inheritance. And the anchor element is going to inherit the font size property from the LI. This is exactly what it says over here. It's getting inherited from the LI. The reason for that is because LI is the parent element of an anchor element. In this case, if we look at the HTML, we have anchor elements as the children of our LIs. And we will look into it in a bit more details later. So let's go ahead and override that default text decoration that's coming from our browser. And for that, we'll be using the element selector and we'll be targeting our anchor elements. And let's go ahead and change the text decoration property to be set to none so that we have none of the text decorations. And let's refresh the page. And now we can see that underline is gone. And now that we're done with general styling to our page, let's go ahead and start learning about pseudo-classes. So I'm going to go ahead and close our inspector tool, and there are multiple types of pseudo-classes that are available to you. And you can go ahead and search for pseudo-classes on MDN to find a complete list, but we're going to start talking about location pseudo-classes. Also, don't really stress about remembering the name of the type that a particular pseudo-class belongs to. Most of the developers don't remember them. Basically, you need to remember what a particular pseudo-class does. So let's begin. And the way that you write your pseudo-class is going to be the following. So we're going to be styling our anchor tags. So let's go ahead and specify A, then followed by the colon and specify the actual pseudo-class. So in this case, we'll be using link pseudo-class and we'll be changing the color to be red. So let's go ahead and talk about what's happening here. And what this pseudo-class, that link pseudo-class, will do is it will basically change the color of links of all A elements that haven't been visited yet to be the color of red. So if we go ahead and save it and refresh the page, notice how all the links have turned red. But notice that as soon as we click on the link, it will actually turn a different color. Well, it's kind of like purplish color, and the reason that all of the links have turned purplish is because the href is the same for all of our elements. So let's go ahead and change the href to be apples for apples, and we'll go with oranges href for oranges, and we'll do the same for bananas. And notice how things And notice how things will differ. So as soon as I refresh the page and click on apples again, only apples will turn a different color because we clicked on it. So we visited a link. So we can also control the color of the visited links by using the visited pseudo-class. So let's see that in action. So once again, we'll be using the anchor elements to actually target, and we'll be using the visited pseudo-class. So what the visited pseudo-class will do is it will change. We're going to change the color to be, let's go with black. So what will happen is all the visited links will actually turn black. Or to see it more clearly, let's actually go with green. And as soon as I refresh, notice what happens to apples. Apples will turn green. And oranges and bananas are still red because we haven't clicked on them. But as soon as I click on oranges, oranges will become green. As soon as I click on bananas, bananas will become green. So once again, the link will basically apply the styling to the links that haven't been visited yet, and the visited pseudo class will apply the styling to links in this case that have been visited. So with location pseudo classes, which blink and visited are part of, you usually target links. And let's explore action pseudo classes. Let's say we want to change the color of links that we hover over. We can do it by using the hover pseudo class. So let's go ahead and use that pseudo class with our link elements. And for that, once again, call in and specify the name of the pseudo class, which is going to be hover. And then we'll be changing color to be, let's go with pink. Why not? So let's go ahead and save it and refresh the page. And now notice what happens to our links as I hover over them. So they will actually turn pink. Let's actually go with Rebecca purple so that we can see it better. Save it and refresh the page. And now as I hover over apples, oranges, and bananas, basically over our links, they will turn purple. And another thing that you can do, you can actually change the color of the element that is being clicked on by using active pseudo class. So let's go ahead and apply the active pseudo class to our links. And we'll be using, let's go with color of, let's go with aqua, why not? And now if I refresh the page, and now as I hover over apples, it turns purple. And now notice what happens when I click on apples, and I'm clicking and I'm holding, and now the color is going to be that aqua color. And the last type of pseudo classes that we'll talk about is going to be tree structure pseudo classes. They basically relate to where the element is positioned in the HTML document. So let's explore that. Let's say we want to apply styles to very first list element, to that apples over here. What we can do is we can use the first child pseudo class to apply the styling to that list element. So let's go ahead and do that. And for that, we'll actually be using li. So let's just scroll down a bit. And for that, we'll be using li, and we'll give it the first child pseudo class. So first dash child pseudo class. And now we can basically change the background color of that, and we'll go with let's go with red, why not? And notice once again it's colon, then the name of the pseudo class, and now all the stylings that you want to apply to the first child element. And now if we refresh the page, we can actually see that the background color of that element is going to be red. The reason for that is because this li over here, if we take a look at the HTML, the li that I'm currently highlighting, this is going to be the first child of the UL, the enclosing parent element. And it's kind of confusing on why we have to apply it to li and not the UL, but the way that you can think about that is you're trying to select an li that is the first child of an element. It doesn't have to be UL, just any kind of element. Notice if we switch li to be in the CSS, if we switch li to be the UL, save it and refresh the page, nothing is going to happen, and the UL won't have that background color of red. Why is that? Well, let's take a look at the HTML. UL is currently a second child of that section element. The section is the parent element of the UL. It's enclosing it. But if we remove the H1, I'm gonna comment it out, and I refresh the page. Now our UL will actually have the red color, the red background color. And the reason for that is because the UL is currently the first child of the section element. So now the styles will apply. So let's go ahead and remove that comment. We'll put the fruits back, and let's change the UL to be li, save the CSS, refresh again. So once again, li, that apples li is currently the first child of the UL, so the background color red will apply to it. And you can do the exact same thing with targeting the last child. So let's go ahead and copy this CSS rule and change the first child to be last child. And if we save it and refresh the page, now the first and last child will be red. Let's go ahead and change the background color to be blue for the last child. Save it and refresh the page. Now we have apples with a background color of red, and we have bananas with a background color of blue. And if you have a more complex selection, you can actually provide a formula on which elements need to be targeted. You can use the nth child pseudo class for that. So let's explore that. So once again, li, colon, specify the pseudo class, which is going to be nth child. And now for this pseudo class, we'll actually have the parentheses where we will specify the formula. So basically the formula for the nth child, let's go with something simple. We'll go with 2n. And what this will do, think about that. If n is 0, it will basically select the 0th element. If n is 1, it will select the second element, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and change the background color of yellow for all the even elements on the page. Let's refresh the page, and now let's break it down. So the nth child has the formula of 2n. So if n is 1, it will apply the styling to the second child. If n is 2, it will apply the styling to the fourth child. Since we only have 3 children inside of that UL, we only going to apply the background color for the oranges, basically an even element. And we can go ahead and copy Alice over and over and over and save the HTML and refresh the page. And now we're going to see a lot more elements, and notice only even elements will have a background color of yellow. Let's go ahead and just comment out the previous 2 selectors or previous 2 CSS rules, and we're going to be using the even and odd. So I'm going to copy nth child right below and change 2n to be 2n plus 1. So basically, if n is 0, it will select the first child. If n is 2, it will select the third child, and so on and so forth. And we'll change the background color to be red in this case. So if I save the file and I refresh the page, what I'm going to expect is that all even elements based on this CSS rule will have a background color of yellow, and all odd elements based on this CSS rule will have a background color of red. So let's go ahead and refresh the page. And that's exactly what happens. So notice apples, bananas, and so on and so forth, all odd elements are actually going to have a background color of red, and all even elements will have a background color of yellow. And this is going to be it for that video. I encourage you to play around with these pseudo classes a little bit more to get a feel of them. And in the next video, we will be styling our forms and exploring more pseudo classes. Stay tuned, and I'll catch you later.